Hello, my name is Lina. I'm a biology teacher of grade 12 in Kurdistan educational compound. In this video, I will talk about chapter 2, section 1. In this section, we will explain circulatory system. And the circulatory system is the system that circulate the substances and nutrients throughout your body by two fluids, which are the lymph and the blood. Circulatory system, we can divide it into two subsystems, cardiovascular system and lymphatic system. Both of them, we will explain them mostly in this section, in section 1. Blood, we will explain it in section 2, and in section 3, we will talk about the other system, which is respiratory system. In cardiovascular system, we will talk about blood, heart, and blood vessels. The blood is the fluid that moves inside the circulatory, the cardiovascular system, and which is made up of 55% of the liquid plasma and 45% of the blood cells that include red blood cell, white blood cell, and platelet. We will explain this part in detail in section 2. Heart is the other part that we will explain it in detail in this section, in section 1, as we will talk about the main heart structures that include chambers, valves, and nodes. The chambers of the heart that include atria and ventricles, and the valves of the heart which include AV valve and SL valve. That AV valve, we can also classify it into tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. While the SL valve, we also have aortic valve and pulmonary valve inside the SL valve. What about the nodes of the heart? The nodes of the heart that we will talk about in this section are the SA node and the AV node. Then we will go to talk about the blood vessels also in this section that include artery, vein, and capillary. At the end of this section, we will talk shortly about lymphatic system that include lymph, lymph nodes, lymph vessels, and inside the lymph vessel, we will explain lymph vessels and lymph capillaries. What are the main two fluids that move through the circulatory system? The two main fluids that move through the circulatory systems are blood and lymph. And the main functions of the circulatory system is, number one, the circulatory system acts as a transport service. It transports what? It transports most of the human body cells throughout what? Throughout the blood and the lymph. It transports nutrients like vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids, for example, and also transports some of the hormones like testosterone from the endocrine system and transport gases like oxygen. It also helps in getting rid of waste like carbon dioxide. Number 3, it helps in maintaining a constant body temperature. So it's not in controlling the body temperature, because the control of the body temperature, it's happened by hormones under the control of nervous system, while it's only help in maintaining the constant body temperature. And how that happen? When a friction happen between the wall of the blood vessel and the blood itself, when it move inside the blood vessel, so it increase the temperature, and this temperature is spread, this heat is spread throughout the circulatory system, and so by that it can help in maintaining a constant body temperature. The cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system collectively together, they make up what? They make up the circulatory system. When we say cardiovascular, as we said, card is for heart and vascular it's for the vessel, so it includes the heart, blood vessel, and the blood that move inside it. While the lymphatic system, as we mentioned before, it includes lymph, lymph node, and lymph vessel. Both of them together, these subsystems are make up the circulatory system. What are the main similarities between blood and lymph? First, both of them, as we said, they are fluids of the circulatory system. Second, both of them contain white blood cell, and because they contain white blood cell, they are important for defending the body against diseases. And third, both of them are tissues. The blood is red in color, while the lymph is yellowish in color. The blood contains proteins, while on the other hand, lymph does not contain protein. Blood move in two directions, which mean in closed circuit from body to heart and from heart to body, while the lymph move in one direction from body to heart. Blood contain all types of blood cells, RBC, YBC, and platelets, while On the other hand, lymph contain only one BC, which is lymphocyte. So we can say that blood have RBC, while lymph do not contain RBC, red blood cell. Now let's go to talk about the main structures of the heart that we will explain in this section. First, we will talk about the pericardium. Cardium means heart, so it's the membrane that surrounds the heart. Second, we will talk about septum. Septum is this wall that can divide the heart into two parts, left and right. Then we will talk about the ventricles. Ventricles are these lower parts of the heart that named as chambers. The lower chambers of the heart that named as ventricles. And we have left and right ventricles because we said that we have the septum, the wall that separates the heart into two sides, left and right. Usually in biology drawing, our right is left and vice versa. So here, the right side of my hand is the left side of the heart of the figure here. So we said that the ventricles are the lower chambers of the heart, and we have the left ventricle and the right ventricle. What do you mean by atria? Atrias are the upper parts of the heart that we have also two sides. We have the left atrium, and the right atrium. And when I say atria is the plural, it's mean for two or more of the or more parts. And when I say atrium, it's singular. It's only when I say, for example, right atrium, like bacteria, bacterium. When we say bacteria, it's plural. When we say bacterium, it's for single bacteria. Then we will talk about the valves of the heart, and here we have valves of the heart 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we will explain them in details later. Also, we have the nodes of the heart that we have two nodes, SA and AV node. Also, we will explain in detail later. Let's go to talk about the main organ or the center organ of the circulatory system or the cardiovascular system, which named as the heart. What is heart? Heart is the central organ of the cardiovascular system. So it's not tissue, it's not an organ system, because the organ system, we said it's cardiovascular system. Instead, it's an organ. And it's the central organ or the main organ of the cardiovascular system. As we said, for example, for digestive system, the main organ or the central organ is the stomach. And for the nervous system, it's the brain. Also for the cardiovascular system, the main or the central organ is the heart. The heart is a muscular organ, and when we say it's a muscular organ, it's made up of muscles, and these muscles are type of cardiac muscle that we mentioned in chapter 1, and we said that cardiac muscle have striations, which mean that they have dark and light strips, and also they have one nucleus, single nuclei, and also they are involuntary, which mean that we can control them consciously. What is the main function of the heart? The heart pumps or moves the blood through a network of blood vessels. Let's go to talk about the location of the heart. Heart lies, as you see in the figure, within this thoracic or the chest cavity that we talk about in chapter 1. It's located behind the sternum. Here we have the sternum that the ribs bind to it of the rib cage, and we also named it as breastbone, and also it's between the two lungs. Heart is surrounded by what? Heart is surrounded by, as you see in the figure, it's surrounded by a membrane. This membrane is a double-layer membrane. It's a tough membrane and sac-like membrane, which is called pericardium. Peri is mean membrane and cardium for the heart. So it's the membrane that surrounds the heart, like the membrane that surrounds the bone that we talk about in chapter 1, which is called periosteum, that surround the shaft of the bone, and also like the membrane that we will talk about later that surround the lung, which is called the pleural. What is the main function of this pericardium, of this membrane? It secretes a fluid, and this fluid reduces the friction when the heart beats. What about the size of the heart? The size, it's about the size of a fist. Heart divided into two sides by septum. So as we said that septum divide the heart into two sides, left and right. What is septum? Septum is the wall that ventrically divides the heart into two sides, left and right. The right side, usually it's colored by blue, which contain of the deoxygenated blood. The right side pumps the deoxygenated blood, while the left side pumped the oxygenated blood to the other parts of the body. And this part pump the deoxygenated blood to the lung, and this part pump the oxygenated blood where to the other parts of the body. What is the function of septum? Septum prevent the mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood from the two sides of the heart. It prevents the mixing of deoxygenated and oxygenated blood from the two sides of the heart. As you see, it separates them. So if a baby or if a hole is present in the septum between the two atria, especially because here the septum is thinner than the septum here between the ventricles. So if there is a hole here in the septum between the two atrium, what happens is that the oxygenated and the oxygenated blood will mix together. Now, heart has chambers also, and each side of the heart is divided into an upper and lower chamber. The upper chambers are named as atria, and the lower chambers named as ventricles. And you can see the heart chambers in this figure. We said that we can classify we can divide the heart into two parts, left and right, by the septum, and also the heart can be divided into two parts in each side. So in left side we have two parts, the upper part and the lower part. The upper part is named as atria, and the lower part atrium, and the lower part is named as ventricle. And also on the other side, which is the right side can be divided into two parts, the upper called right atrium and the lower called right ventricle. So pay attention to atria and atrium. If we say atria, so it means it's for both of them, right and left atria and atrium. And if we say for one of them, it will be atrium for singular one, like bacterium. What are the main differences between atria and ventricles? Atria are, as we see in the figure, are the upper chambers of the heart, while the ventricles are the lower chambers of the heart. Atria usually connected to the veins, while ventricles connected to the arteries, which includes pulmonary and aortic aorta. Then they receive blood, the atria, oxygenated and deoxygenated from all parts of the body by veins, while the ventricles pump blood to all parts of the body by arteries. So if we return to the figure, we can see that we have, as we said, the atria and ventricle, and we say that atria, usually the atrias receive the blood, okay, while the ventricles pump the blood. Here, the right atrium receive which type of blood, oxygenated or deoxygenated? It receives the deoxygenated, while left atrium receive oxygenated blood. And the ventricles usually pump the blood. And when they pump the blood, they pump them through arteries or through veins? They pump them through arteries. So usually the ventricles bind to arteries, while the atria bind to veins. Okay, and the right ventricle usually pump deoxygenated blood, while the left ventricle pump oxygenated blood. Atria is the site of auricular systole, biphasa, that we will talk about later, while ventricle is the site of ventricular systole, which means ventricle contraction happen here, while here the atrium contraction happen here. Atria have thinner wall than the ventricle, while ventricles have thicker wall. As you see in the figure, that the wall of the ventricle is thicker, while the wall of the atria is thinner. Now let's go to talk about the valves of the heart. What are valves? Valves are flaps of tissues, like layers of tissue that open in only one direction. So what is the main function of them? They ensure that the blood flow in one direction. It means they prevent the flowing back of blood in the other direction. The heart valves, we can divide them into two major groups, AV valve and SL valve. AV, it means atrioventricular valve, and SL means semilunar valve. Atrioventricular valve, from their name, so they are located between what and what? They are located between the atria and the ventricle. And we have two types of these atrioventricular valve, the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. And from their name, it's appear that tri, it means three, so they have three parts, while the bicuspid valve have two parts or two flaps. On the other hand, we have semilunar valve, SL valve. The SL valve include aortic and pulmonary valve. So let's start to talk about the AV valves. We said that atrioventricular valve that located between atria and ventricle. And as they located between atria and ventricle, so we have two AV valves, the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve. And tricuspid valve, this is the tricuspid valve that consists of three parts, while bicuspid include two parts. That's why it's named as tricuspid and the other one named as bicuspid valve. The tricuspid valve, usually it's right AV valve. So we name it as AV valve, right AV valve, or tricuspid valve. It's located between the right atrium and the right ventricle. While the bicuspid valve, on the other hand, have three names. We can say it's bicuspid valve, we can say it's the left AV valve, or we can say it's named as mitral valve. And this valve is located between the left atrium and the left ventricle. AV valves in general, what is the main function of these AV valves? In general, they are the valves that are located between the atria and the ventricles. And their function is that as the ventricles pump, it means when the ventricles contract or they pump blood pressure close the AV valves to prevent the flow back of the blood into the atria. So the main function or the function of AV valves in general prevent flowing back of what? Of blood from ventricle to atria. So what happened is that they closed when the ventricles contract or the blood is pumped, the valves are closed to prevent the flow back of the blood from ventricle to atria. But if I said what is the function of only tricuspid valve, which is here, it prevents oxygenated or deoxygenated blood, it prevents the deoxygenated blood from flowing back from right ventricle to right atrium. What about if I said the function of bicuspid valve or mitral valve or left AV valve? The function of this valve is to prevent flowing back of oxygenated blood from left ventricle into left atrium. Figure 2:1, this figure is in our book, is in your book, the septum, as we said, this wall that divides the heart into two parts, left and right, and we said it prevents the mixing of blood from the two sides of the heart. And the valves, we said that they ensure the blood is flow in one direction. It prevents the flowing back of blood in another direction. The second type of valves that we have, before we talk about the second valve, AV valve close when the ventricles contract. As we said before, when these ventricles contract in order to pump blood, these valves, they are closed by the blood pressure, while when the ventricles are relaxed, these valves are open to ensure the flowing of the blood from atria to ventricle. The second type of valves was named as semilunar valve. Semilunar valve are these valves that separate the ventricles from the large vessels, which are the aorta and pulmonary artery on each side of the heart. So if we go to the figure, these two valves are named as semilunar valve. These valves separate what from what? They separate the ventricles from the two large arteries. The two large arteries are pulmonary artery and aorta. So again, semilunar valve are these valves that separate the ventricles from the large vessels, aorta and pulmonary artery on each side of the heart. What is the main function of the semilunar valve or SL valves? They prevent, in general, they prevent the blood from flowing back into the ventricles when the heart relaxes. So for AV valve, when the ventricle contract, while the SL valve close when the ventricles relax. What are the types of SL valve? We have two types. One, it's between the ventricle and the pulmonary artery, which is named as pulmonary valve, and the other is between aorta and the ventricle, which is named as aortic valve. So pulmonary valve, it's the right SL valve located between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, prevent deoxygenated blood from flowing back into the right ventricle when the heart relaxes. What about aortic valve on the other hand? It's the left SL valve located between the left ventricle and the aorta, preventing oxygenated blood from flowing back into the left ventricle when the heart relaxes. So if we go to see these valves here of the heart, you can see the tricuspid valve, which have these three parts here. And we said that tricuspid valve is located between the right ventricle and the right atrium, while the bicuspid or mitral valve, it's located between left ventricle and left atria. What about the SL valve, the semilunar valve? Here are the semilunar valve. We have pulmonary valve here and we have aortic valve here. Let's start with pulmonary valve. Okay? It's a type of SL valve. This type of SL valve is located between the right ventricle and pulmonary artery. And its function, what? Its function to prevent the flowing back of what? The flowing back of the blood from the pulmonary artery, which blood? Deoxygenated blood, prevent it from flowing back from the pulmonary artery to ventricle when they are closed. And when they are closed when the ventricle is in contract or in relax, when the ventricle relax. What about the other valve, which is named as aortic valve? Aortic valve, it's located between the left ventricle and between aorta, large blood vessel, which is named as aorta. It's allow blood to move from ventricle to aorta when this valve is open. And when this valve, when the heart is in relax, when ventricle is in relax, this valve is closed in order to prevent the flowing back of blood from aorta, which is oxygenated blood from aorta to the left ventricle. So SL valve open when ventricles in contract. When the ventricle contract, they are opened in order to allow the oxygenated blood here to move through the aortic valve and the oxygenated blood to go to the lung through the pulmonary valve. And SL valve close when ventricle relax. When the ventricle relax, so it's prevent the flowing back of these oxygenated and deoxygenated blood to the ventricles. Now let's go to talk about other subject, which is the circulation of blood in the heart. We have the figure in your book, which is figure 222, to trace the path of blood as it circulates through the heart. And we will go to talk about the circulation of the blood in the heart directly on the figure. This is the pathway of the blood that moves through our heart and goes to the body and to the lung. First, we will start with number one, the deoxygenated blood. And when we say deoxygenated blood, it's not mean it's only consists of CO2. It contains CO2 in high concentration and oxygen in low concentration. So the deoxygenated blood that comes from the body goes through the two veins, which are two large veins, which are superior vena cava that come from upper parts of the body, and the inferior vena cava that carry the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body. Both of them go to where? Go to the right atrium. So in the first point, the deoxygenated or oxygen poor blood, we can say, enters the right atrium through superior and inferior vena cava, the two large veins that enter the right atrium. Then the blood goes from the right atrium, pumped from the right atrium to the right ventricle, which is the deoxygenated blood, and goes through this valve that we mentioned, which is named as tricuspid valve. When this valve open, when the atria contract and the valve open, the blood flows from right atrium to right ventricle. In the right ventricle, when the ventricles contract by the blood pressure, the deoxygenated blood goes through this valve open and the pulmonary valve open, and the deoxygenated blood travels through the pulmonary artery. This large artery is the large artery that goes to the lung. And inside the lung, what happened is that the deoxygenated blood changed into oxygenated blood. How? By diffusion, the lungs, the blood give the CO2 to the lung, and the lung give oxygen to the blood. Then now we have oxygenated blood, that how it's returned back to the heart. It's returned back to the heart through these pulmonary veins. We have 4 pulmonary veins that return the oxygenated blood into where? Into the left atrium. Now we have oxygenated blood in this left atrium. It's pumped, or it goes down through the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. A left ventricle, by the contraction of the muscular wall of this left ventricle, it forces the blood into a large vessel through the valve, which is named as aortic valve. It forces the blood to go here to this large blood vessel, the largest blood vessel, which is named as aorta. Blood is transported through the aorta to all parts of the body. Now here we have a question: which chamber is the thickest chamber of the heart? It's the left chamber, the left ventricle, the left ventricle chamber. It's, as you see here, it's the thickest one. Why it's the thickest one? Because it has to do most of the work and to pump blood to all parts of the body. So the left ventricle is thickest because it must do most of the work, and it must pump the blood to all parts of the body. Usually you can see in the figures in drawing the heart, deoxygenated blood is commonly represented by the blue color, while the oxygenated is represented by red color. This, however, it's misconception. It's wrong. But they mentioned that because the deoxygenated is not blue, deoxygenated instead it's dark red. When oxygen is attached to the hemoglobin, the blood is bright red, while without oxygen, the blood is dark red. But this dark red blood in veins, it appears blue when it shows through the vein wall of the skin. Now, how many vessels we have here in the blood, in the heart? The vessels in the heart, we have 8. We have these 2, 1, 2. We have 3, 4, and these 4. So we have 8 blood vessels. How many blood vessels enter the heart, and how many blood vessel goes away of the heart? How many blood vessels enter the heart? We have 1, 2 superior and inferior vena cava, with these 4 blood vessels that they make the veins, the pulmonary veins. So we have 6 entering the heart, and only 2 that goes away from the heart, aorta and pulmonary artery. Okay, how many blood vessels carry the deoxygenated blood? Deoxygenated, 1, 2, 3. And how many blood vessels carry oxygenated blood? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here is the figure in our book that mention all the pathway of the circulation of the blood in the heart, as we mentioned it before. And we said that trace the path of blood through the heart. Notice the illustration of the heart are drawn as in the heart, where in the person facing you. That's why our right side would be the left side in the figure, and our left side will be the right side in the figure. And we see the flow of the blood on the left side of the heart is illustrated within an arrow representing oxygenated blood, which has a bright red color, while the blue color is for deoxygenated blood, which is poor in oxygen. So shortly, the circulation of blood in the heart, the color red is for oxygenated and the color blue is for deoxygenated. We can start from the 2 large veins, which are superior and inferior vena cava, that carry the deoxygenated blood from the body to the heart. and goes to where? Both of them goes to the right atrium. Now in right atrium we have deoxygenated blood that pumps into right ventricle by opening the tricuspid valve, and in right ventricle by opening the pulmonary valve it goes to the pulmonary arteries. In pulmonary arteries they goes to the lungs also by another valve opened here, which is the pulmonary valve, and inside the lung the exchange of gases happen and they change from blue to red. It's mean from deoxygenated to oxygenated blood. Now it's full of oxygen in this blood, and it's returned from lung to the left atrium through pulmonary veins, and we see that we have 4 pulmonary veins that return to the left atrium. In left atrium this oxygenated blood is pumped to the left ventricle by opening the bicuspid valve, and from left ventricle they travel through aorta by aortic valve when it's open, and from aorta they goes to the rest of the body. Another figure that shows the valves and the atria, the ventricles of the heart, and also the blood vessels that go away from the heart, which have the pulmonary artery that goes to the lung and the aorta that goes to the body. This one carry the deoxygenated blood and this one carry the oxygenated blood to the body. And also we have the superior and inferior vena cava. We said that these 2 veins carry the deoxygenated blood and goes to where? To the right atrium. And also we have pulmonary veins that carry the oxygenated blood and goes to the left atrium. So in the left side of the heart and in the right side of the heart, how many blood vessels we have in the right side of the heart? 1, 2, and 3. How many blood vessels in the left side of the heart? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Usually the atrias are bind to veins, while the ventricles bind to what? They bind to arteries. Why? Because they carry the blood away from the heart and the veins carry it to the heart. Except we have one exception, which is pulmonary vein that carry it to the heart, to the oxygenated blood to the left atrium. And also we have pulmonary artery, which go away from the heart and goes to the lung, carry the deoxygenated blood to the lung. Okay, what is the main function of pulmonary veins? Here are the pulmonary veins. They return the oxygenated blood to the left atrium from the lungs, and the left ventricles is the thickest chamber, as we said before. Why? Because it has to do most of the work and pump blood to all parts of the body. Now here is a table of the main differences between the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. In the right side of the heart, usually the blood color on the right side is dark red. We said because deoxygenated and full of CO2, it's poor in oxygen. While the blood color on the left side is bright color because it's carried the oxygenated blood. As we said, it's here oxygenated and deoxygenated and oxygenated. It's connected to 3 blood vessels, the right side of the heart, which are superior, inferior vena cava, and pulmonary artery, while here it's connected to 5 blood vessels, 4 pulmonary veins, and 1 aorta. Then pump blood into the lung, the right side of the heart, while here the left side it pump blood to the body parts except the lung. Here the right side connected to the pulmonary artery, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. Here it's connected to 4 pulmonary vein and aorta. Here the right side is less muscular, while the left side is more muscular. It contains SA node that we will talk about later, node that control the heartbeat, which is SA node. It's on the right side, while the left side doesn't contain any node in it. Here the right side contains tricuspid and pulmonary valve, while in the left side we can see bicuspid and aortic valve. Here you have some questions about the heart. You can answer them. For example, what is number 1? Number 1, it's pulmonary artery. What about number 2? It's superior vena cava. What about number 3? It's the right atrium. What about number 4? Here we have the tricuspid valve. What about number 5? Number 5, also we have this valve, which is named as pulmonary valve. What about number 6? It's right ventricle. Number 7 is inferior vena cava. You can continue for the others and quiz yourself in it. Okay, so that's all for this video. We will continue this section in next video. Thanks for watching.